Okay, so I wanted to continue the talk that I started yesterday, which was about guns in America, because I got an email from, one of the lists that I'm on that said, faith leaders, now is your chance. And so to educate people about gun use in America. So yesterday was part one, today's part two. So some other things that I found out on the web in articles, in addition to the statistics I gave you yesterday. So the retired General Stanley McChrystal joined the ranks of those calling for wiser gun restrictions, saying, I spent a career carrying typically either an M16 and later an M4 carbine. And an M4 carbine fires .223 caliber round, which is 5.56 millimeters at about 3,000 feet per second. When it hits a human body, the effects are devastating. It's designed to do that, and that's what our soldiers ought to carry. I personally don't think there's any need for that kind of weaponry on the street, and particularly around the schools in America. I believe that we've got to take a serious look. I understand everybody's desire to have what they want, but we've got to protect our children, and we've got to protect our police, and we've got to protect our population. And I think we've got to take a very mature look at that. So that's coming from a general. I also read an op-ed article by somebody who was in Afghanistan and was a sharpshooter in Afghanistan. And he was commenting on people calling for citizens to, in general, to have more arms, saying, because those people thought that it would prevent, mass shootings, and in the case of, somebody starting to shoot in a movie theater or so on, that, the public would just shoot that guy and that would finish it and save lives. And this soldier said that he doesn't think that's going to work, because if it's very hard to sometimes in a crowd know exactly who you're shooting and who you're aiming at, and citizens who are not trained in this way to identify, who to shoot, who not to shoot, what to do in, let's say, a movie theater or in a school or whatever, could wind up killing many more innocent people while the mass shooter just ran off somewhere. So it was the viewpoint from a soldier who was trained in the use of these weapons. Then I also was reading that if people have guns in their homes, they are much more likely to get shot than people who don't have guns in their homes. This is quite interesting. And so recently I read two stories. One was about a 19-year-old boy, and he was fighting with his girlfriend all weekend. And you know how young couples are when they fight, and it's so emotional, and they're crying and screaming, and she's saying, I want you to die, and they're out of control, and this is going on for 2 days. And at one point they were in his father's house, and his father had a shotgun. The boy went to get the shotgun. The ammo was in a different room. He went to get the ammo and loaded it. And, they continue fighting. And at one point he goes in and he says, do you really want to die? And aims the gun. And she screams no. And just at that moment, he fires the gun. And it was tragedy. I mean, they were both 19 years old. She died. His life was ruined. And the parents of the girl were saying, and the boy too, were saying, if that gun weren't in their house, that girl would still be alive now. Yeah. Because, okay, you fight, but if there's no gun around, you're not going to shoot anybody. The other thing I read in the newspaper is about a 10-year-old boy who shot and killed his father, who was a neo-Nazi. This was a big thing in the newspaper. And so the child was getting physically and verbally abused a lot. And at 10 years old, took his father's gun, which was in the house, and shot the father. You know, so these are the kind of stories all over of people getting shot by the weapons that they possess themselves. Like Adam Lanza's mother, who was the gun enthusiast, and her son took her guns and shot her with her guns. You know? And then also, just recently, the beginning of the month, there was a 32-year-old man who, he has a very, very popular website that gets millions and millions of hits because he makes these violent video clips with different kind of weapons, you know, and these video clips, and then there's always a huge explosion at the end of them, and really millions of hits on his website. Anyway, he was found dead, shot in his office, you know, in some small town in Georgia. And his wife is, I mean, everybody's puzzled because he was surrounded by guns, and yet he couldn't defend himself with one of those guns, you know, and they don't know who killed him, but he's 32 years old, you know, and for all his love of guns, he actually loved guns so much that he took a Starbucks sticker and had the mermaid hold 2 pistols and then said, put on the back, "I love guns and coffee." And he got shot in the, you know, I think he got shot in the head or in the chest, I can't remember which, but he was killed, you know. So, you know, there's so many stories like this. So then there's also an article yesterday that Americans under the age of 50 have much worse health and higher death rates than comparable citizens in other developed countries. So they have much higher death rates from death from guns than their counterparts in other developed countries. And the role of firearm homicides is 20 times higher than in other developed countries. In our country, 20 times higher for those under 50. Our suicide rate is lower, but the firearm suicide rate is much higher. And so of all the homicides of people under 50, 69%, so almost 70% of the fire, oh, I'm sorry, I read it wrong. All the firearm homicides in the developed countries, 69% occur in the US and 20% in all the other countries combined. Quite interesting. So just for people to contemplate, you know, because this has to do with our Dharma practice in the sense of the first precept, which is to abandon killing or physically harming anybody. It has to do with our practice of having love and compassion for other living beings, including criminals, including those who have different political views or views on guns than we do. But I think this issue is quite related to our Dharma practice and something that we need to really think carefully about and be proactive about for the benefit of the people who live in our country and the benefit of the world. So part 3 will be tomorrow, because Ken wrote, he sent us a letter that he wrote to the editor of the Spokane Review, so I want to read that tomorrow and talk a little bit about some of Donnie's impressions, first impressions of the U.S. when you came here. So.